And Samson's story, well, it starts before he was even born. He was chosen, set apart for a mission that was going to define his entire life.
I mean, just picture this. An angel shows up to a couple that can't have kids and says, "Hey, you're going to have a son." And not just any son. This kid is destined to start saving Israel from their biggest enemies, the Philistines. Talk about pressure, right? From the moment he took his first breath, Samson was carrying the weight of a nation on his shoulders.
And the secret to his power, the source code, if you will, was this. Samson was a Nazirite. Now, this wasn't a career path he picked. He was dedicated to God from birth. This sacred vow came with a super strict set of rules, and as long as he played by those rules, his incredible strength was basically guaranteed.
The rules themselves sound pretty simple, but they were absolutely critical. No booze, no forbidden foods. And then there's the big one, the most important rule of all. He could never, ever, ever cut his hair. Those long locks weren't just a cool hairstyle. They were the physical symbol of his vow, the direct hotline to his divine power.
And with that power, oh man, came some truly legendary feats of strength. We're not just talking about being the strong guy at the gym. Samson was a literal force of nature.
So for example, pretty early on, a young lion jumps him on the road. No weapon, no problem. Samson just grabs it and rips it apart with his bare hands. This wasn't just self-defense, it was a raw, unfiltered demonstration of the power just coursing through him. But Samson wasn't just all brute force. He had a pretty clever and destructive side too. In one act of personal revenge, he catches 300 foxes, ties torches to their tails, and then just sets them loose in the Philistine fields. He completely destroyed their harvest and their food supply. It was strategic and a huge symbolic blow against his enemies. And then you have this, which is probably his most famous moment. He's surrounded by 1,000 Philistine soldiers. 1,000! So what does he do? He just grabs the first thing he can find, the jawbone of a donkey, and takes them all down. By himself. At this point, you'd think he was absolutely invincible.
But here's the twist. No army on earth could do what Samson's own heart would eventually do to him. His biggest weakness wasn't something you could fight with a sword or a shield. It was an internal battle, a fatal temptation that was going to lead to his complete downfall.
You see, his kryptonite was his love for women, especially Philistine women, the very people he was supposed to be fighting. He kept ignoring God's command not to get involved with them. But his love for one woman, a woman named Delilah, would be his final and his most catastrophic mistake.
I mean, the setup couldn't be more dramatic. You've got Samson, the chosen protector of Israel, falling head over heels for Delilah, a Philistine woman who's literally being bribed by her own leaders to discover his one weakness. Their relationship was a trap from the very beginning.
And Delilah, she was relentless. Over and over, she begged Samson to tell her his secret. He actually lied to her 3 different times, and each time she'd set a trap and he'd just easily break free. But she didn't give up. She kept at it, using sweet words, tears, affection, anything she could to just wear him down. And eventually all that pressure worked. Samson's emotional weakness completely overwhelmed his divine purpose. This is the exact moment the legend turns into a full-blown tragedy. He's just broken down by her constant pleading, and he tells her everything. He spills the secret of his Nazirite vow, the one thing connecting him to God's power. He tells her, "If my hair is cut, I'll be as weak as any other man." He gave her the key to his own destruction.
So, while he was sleeping, Delilah had his hair cut. When he woke up, he thought he could just shake off his captors like all the other times. But he was so wrong. He didn't realize that by breaking that sacred vow, the power was gone. The Lord had left him.
And the fallout was immediate and just brutal. The invincible hero was captured. His enemies gouged out his eyes, a pretty horrifying symbol for his own spiritual blindness. He was thrown in prison, forced to grind grain like an animal, and became a public joke for the Philistines to laugh at. But the story doesn't end there, in that dark prison cell. In his moment of absolute defeat, of total humiliation, something started to change. Samson's hair began to grow back, and maybe so did his faith. After being stripped of absolutely everything, his strength, his sight, his freedom, Samson finally turned back to the real source of his power. He repented and he prayed to God not for himself, but to finally fulfill the mission he was given at birth.
and his prayer is this humble, desperate plea for one last chance. He asks God to just remember him, to give him strength one more time, not for his own glory, but for justice against the Philistines who took his sight.
So the Philistines, they bring him to their temple to make fun of him during a huge festival. They put him right between the two central pillars holding up the entire building. And with his final prayer answered, Samson puts his hands on those pillars and pushes with all his might. The whole temple comes crashing down, killing him and thousands of Philistine leaders. In his death, he finally fulfilled his destiny.
Which brings us right back to where we started. Samson's story seems to tell us that all the strength in the world doesn't mean a thing without loyalty to something greater than yourself. It really makes you wonder, what truly defines a hero? Is it their raw power, or is it their unwavering faithfulness? I mean, what do you think weighs more?